Was it like meeting George for the first time?
That I remember really well. I was doing this film called Dream Child, which was the story of Lewis Carroll and when he meets young Alice in Wonderland. We had been lucky enough to be able to convince Jim Henson in his creature shop to do all the animatronic creatures. And that particular day, we had an office at Elstree, but we didn't have a stage because George had all the other stages. Plus, he had a crew of like 450 people. It wasn't his film. He had come to help Walter Murch, who was the director, and the studio had threatened to fire him. So Francis Coppola and George agreed to come and stay in England and, just be there for him and support him. His longtime, friend and collaborator, it was a guy named Robert Watts, who started off as a location manager on Star Wars, the original Star Wars. And he was a big hero of mine. I really liked him. He was a fantastic person, and we used to see each other at the studio all the time while we were prepping.
The first question I asked, actually, before I even read the script, when it said it's in Egypt, I said, do we see the Sphinx, the pyramids, or any of that? I said, no, just the streets. I said, then we don't have to go to Egypt. Tunisia is a much easier place to shoot. And we'd been there before, so I knew the country. This was right in the area where we shot Star Wars. The canyon where Indy is above them and they've got the arc going down, it's the same canyon where R2-D2 is taken by the Jawas in Star Wars. It's exactly the same location.
Anyway, one day he said, look, would you mind if George came by and, just watched you guys film me? Because, as I said, he had a huge crew, and we had a crew of 20 people. We were making this complicated film with animatronics, and, we were shooting the film in 5 weeks.
Wow.
And he came over, and he just, you could tell, even though I was just introduced to him by Robert, but he stayed for a long time. And then we had a chance to talk for a bit and, about how many days shooting, what was working with Jim like, and, the whole basic normal conversations you'd have with somebody who's visiting the set. But I could tell immediately that he actually loved what he was watching. He loved the idea that we were shooting in 5 weeks. He loved the idea that we had this small crew. He loved that, the film was costing barely anything. What the weekly cost on his film is what we were making the whole film for.
Wow.
So, you could tell. And also you could tell how comfortable he was being on a small set, because the irony is that George is actually a very small filmmaker. This accident of Star Wars created this other world for him. But, THX, American Graffiti, they were all shot in 20, 25 days for very, very little money. I think American Graffiti was like $750,000. So, you could tell that's where he wanted to be in a way. So, it was a special day for me, and then I would see him over the next couple of years at the studio and say hello and everything. But I have no idea if he even knew who I was then, if he could remember that day. But it helped later on when I was first interviewed by him.
What was that like? I mean, you're probably the earliest we've gotten in the development process of the show. How were you approached for this, and how did that start?
Well, what happened was, I think I can't remember. I think he tried to get Robert to do it, but Robert had just started his own company at Twickenham, and he wanted to, pursue his own projects. But that's when Robert suggested that he meet me, but he wanted to meet a whole bunch of people. So I think there were like 6, 8, maybe even 10 people that he met. So we met at his hotel, and I was the last person because I was filming actually then. So I got there kind of not late, but I got there on time, but it was at the end of the day. And from what I could see with the other people, he was spending maybe 10, 15 minutes with each person. Anyway, I went in and, 2 hours later, I left. And it was just one of those instant things. We were completely in sync, as he outlined what he was trying to achieve. And I think he loved the fact, ultimately, from what I understand later on, he loved the fact that I had worked with John Frankenheimer for 3.5 years, which was almost longer than any other person was able to work with John with. And he also, I was also in the DGA as an assistant director and a production manager. So those are the things that kind of helped. And he loved the fact that I lived in Europe as an American, and we just, on every level, as he did the outline, there were, he brought up, I want to create this digital world. I want this to be a blueprint for the things, the films that I want to do in the future. It has to have a cinematic quality. You have to travel all around. And these are things that I had been doing for this decade. And once I kind of explained to him that's what was, that's what my life was, I think, we left on said goodbye, and then, you never know whether you're going to hear back again. And then about 2 days later, I got a call from Lucasfilm, not from George, but from the head of Lucasfilm, saying, look, George would like you to do this, but he also wants to have another, he said, you'll be the senior producer, but he'd like to hire another producer to dovetail from each country to the thing. And I said foolishly, look, I'm very happy with what I'm doing now. That's just that's a mental landscape I can't get into. I'm not going to worry about another producer and another thing. If I were going to do this, it would have to just be me. And, I understand why you want to do that, but I didn't want to get caught up in, the world of ABC, Paramount, and then Lucasfilm, and go through all the political bullshit that I knew would happen, because I went through it at MGM when I was doing Pennies from Heaven, and at Fox when I was doing IWN Pictures. So I kind of, I told him, I said, thank you very much, and please send my best to George and thank him for even considering me, etc. But do you understand why? I gave, I outlined the reasons for him. And then 2 days later, I get another, thinking that was it. I got another call from him, and he said, no, it's good. You're the dude. Just go for it, and make it work, basically.
Wow. So you said no to George Lucas.
Well, I didn't say no to him. I said it to the head of Lucas. If he had called, I probably would have said, okay, yes, of course, hire as many people as you want.